This video covers the entirety of 1.6 operating systems. So an operating system is essentially software that manages a computer system, and one of its primary functions is to manage resources. So in terms of resources, the things that we mean are it manages peripherals such as input and output devices. So it communicates with and sends data output to things like printers or monitors or any other output device. And it also communicates with and receives data from input devices such as keyboards and mice. It also manages printing using something called spooling. So this means that data is stored in a queue and the document can be printed when the printer is free, which means that you can log off before your print job is finished. It also manages backing store. This is not backups, this is the backing store as in where you save your files. So it ensures that data is stored and can be retrieved correctly from any disk drives, and it also creates and maintains filing systems so that you can have folders within folders and file names, etc. It manages RAM. This means that it ensures that all the programs and data that's currently in use do not corrupt each other, and it ensures that all program and data, including itself, are stored correctly in memory locations. It manages processes. So it ensures that different processes can utilize the CPU and they don't interfere with each other or crash. And it also allows multitasking so that tasks appear essentially to run simultaneously. We're going to look a little bit more at multitasking shortly. It manages security, which means that you can create and delete user accounts, and it allows users to log on and change passwords. So multitasking, this is the execution of multiple tasks or processes at the same time. So new tasks can interrupt already started ones before they finish instead of waiting for them to end. So if you type in a word but you're also playing music in the background, it doesn't wait for that song to end before it types your word that you've typed into a text editor. So as a result, the computer executes segments of multiple tasks in an interleaved manner, while the tasks share common processing resources such as the CPU. So it will play a bit of the music, it will then type in one of the letters, it will continue playing the music, it will type in the next letter, and because it's doing that so quickly, it seems that everything is happening at the same time, but actually it's in an interleaved manner. So interrupts, we said that certain tasks can interrupt others, and there's a ranking of which tasks sort of outrank others in terms of what is most important. So a signal is sent to the CPU, which is normally generated when an input or output is required. And there are two types of interrupt. There's hardware and software. Hardware interrupts are generated when a key is pressed or when the mouse is moved, and software interrupts are generated by programs requiring some disk input or output. So the operating system, the CPU, will suspend the programs in order to deal with the interrupt and then resume the programs from the point that they got up to. So they may have different priorities, as I've mentioned. For example, hardware failure would have a higher priority than an input interrupt. So interrupts generated by running processes. So the process might need to perform input-output operations or obtain more storage or communication with the operator. So these are the different types that you need to be aware of. The input-output interrupts, these are initiated by the input-output hardware, such as a mouse or a keyboard, and they signal to the CPU that the status of a channel or device has changed, such as the mouse has moved position. An input-output interrupt will occur when an input-output operation is completed, or when an error code is shown up, or when the device is made ready. A timer interrupts, these are generated by a timer within the CPU, and they enable the operating system to perform certain functions at regular intervals, e.g. a user in a multi-user operating system might be allocated a certain amount of time of the processor before the time passes to the next person. So, operating systems also provide user interfaces. So essentially a user interface is a program or a suite of programs or software that allow the user to interact with the computer in many ways. It's the bit that allows a human to interact with a computer, essentially. So it will do things like allow you to copy, delete, move files. It will allow you to access system settings, such as having a look at the hardware that's installed. It may also provide you with a command line interface, which we'll look at in more detail shortly. It allows users to have more than one window open, so you can have things side by side or one in front of the other. And it provides a graphical user interface. So that tends to provide windows, icons, menus, and pointers. It provides user with help or error messages. and it allows you to customize the interface, such as changing your desktop picture or the colors of the buttons or the size of the font. It also allows you to switch between tasks or programs when you're using multitasking. So one of the first types of user interface is called a GUI, or a graphical user interface, or GUI. So this is the one that you tend to use the most. This is where it involves pictures. So you can see a little example there of a Windows desktop, and you can see that we have two windows, one in front of the other. We have icons, there are menus down the side, and you would use a mouse pointer to interact with that. Now, there are many advantages and disadvantages of a GUI. For example, it is very intuitive, it's easy to learn. You don't need to learn a lot of commands to be able to operate the system, so you don't need a lot of training and things like that. So another type of operating system interface is a menu-driven interface, and this allows you to interact with the computer through a series of menus. Now you can see a picture of an iPod there, which is probably before your time, but you will also see them potentially in cars. So you might have a menu system in some cars where you haven't got a big touchscreen display, where you can select a series of different menus and you can get into different settings. So they're very easy to learn. You don't need to learn a lot of commands. They're quite easy to navigate, so they're ideal for beginners, and you don't need to learn any codes. As I've said, it doesn't also use much processing power. One of the negatives, though, is that it takes a long time to get anywhere, so it can be irritating if it takes you too long to get to the menu that you need to get to. Another type of user interface is a voice-driven interface. So you'll all be familiar with Alexa devices or Google devices that you can have in home, or voice-driven interfaces within cars, for example. So it uses voice recognition so that you can issue commands to the computer system, and it's a good way because it's a natural way to interact with a device. So it can be faster to input than a keyboard. You don't need to learn to type. You're not going to get RSI, which is repetitive strain injury, from doing too much typing. It's potentially going to reduce typing mistakes. You don't need a desk, really. You don't need a mouse and a keyboard, so it will take up a lot less space. It helps people with disabilities that are unable to type, and it means that it can also be hands-free so that you can multitask, such as driving a car at the same time. Some of the drawbacks, you need to be in a quiet environment because the background noise might interfere with it. People with a speech impediment would struggle with that, or even if you've got a strong accent or a sore throat, they're not going to be able to interact with the device as easily. It's difficult to keep your data private because other people can hear what you're saying, and also some words have multiple meanings, such as to, may not be recognised in the correct way. So as I mentioned, command line interface, this is something that's often provided by a GUI as well, but some interfaces just have a command line interface. And this is where you communicate, you interact with the computer system entirely through written commands. Now it can be very quick if you are an expert, because you'll know the commands, so you can get straight to the device manager settings, for example, straight away, rather than going through a number of menus. However, you do need to know the commands, so you need to have learnt them essentially in order for it to be efficient, so it's not very intuitive. It doesn't use as much processing power, as you can imagine. It's only text on a screen. It doesn't need to process any graphical images. Touch-sensitive interfaces, you will all be extremely familiar with these, I'm sure. This is where you interact with the device or the operating system by touching or tapping on the screen. It can also be used with smart pens and things like that, and you can pinch the screen, swipe the screen in different ways to interact with the device. Very intuitive to learn how to use. In fact, you don't really need to learn how to use it. It's just kind of a natural way of interacting with the device. You don't need a mouse or a keyboard, so again, there's less desk space needed. And sometimes people find it easier, especially if you're young, young children. It's easier to touch something on a screen than use a mouse. It relies on the screen not being damaged or scratched or too dirty to read, which can happen obviously if you keep touching a screen. And you need to be within arm's reach of the display. And sometimes it can be difficult to select small items or move them around on the screen where you might need a mouse. So another useful feature of most operating systems, especially those that are GUI or graphical user interfaces, is that they provide utility software. Now, one thing I've found when marking these exam papers is that some of you know what the utility software is in terms of a definition. If I said give me a definition of an archiver, you'd probably be able to do that. However, didn't realise that that was utility software. So all the things that I'm about to discuss are classed as utility software, and that is software that's extra little programs and tools that are provided by the operating system to make it more useful and to help you do sort of general day-to-day tasks. The first example is antivirus software. So this is a bit of software, a tool that scans your computer for viruses. It can also scan incoming emails and attachments and any files that you've already downloaded. It can warn the user of any suspicious files that it might find, with an option then to delete the viruses or quarantine them. It maintains itself by updating its database with all the latest virus definitions, and it also uses heuristic scanning methods that identify unclassified viruses based on virus-like behaviour. A firewall, this is software or hardware that protects a network system from unauthorised access. So the firewall is network security that monitors incoming and outgoing network traffic, and it blocks them based on the content or a set of predetermined rules. It therefore acts as a barrier that protects the users of the network from untrusted or undesirable content, usually from the internet. So you'll all be familiar with the school's smooth wall monitor. That's essentially our firewall that stops untrustworthy or undesirable websites being displayed in school. Defragmentation, this is the process where files are physically rearranged on a hard disk so that they're no longer fragmented and all the parts of the file are stored together. So what that means is you may have a video file where different parts of that video are stored physically on different parts of that metal disc. And it's about moving them so that they're all back together again. The reason for that is then that the read-write head, the arm that reads the metal disc, doesn't have to keep whizzing across the other side of the disc to find the next part of the video. It's all in one place. So that means that it's going to run faster. So as it says there, if a file is fragmented, it takes longer for the disk heads to move between the parts of the file, which slows down the process of loading it. If they're all together, it speeds that up. Compression or archiving, this is where software reduces the file sizes so that they use less space. The good thing about that is that it allows more data to be stored on the disk, and you might also then be able to transfer them more quickly if you're copying and pasting into a new directory or something like that. So there's two main methods of achieving disk compression. One is software based and the other is hardware based. So software compression can slow down access, but it's readily available, it's easy to use. Hardware compression doesn't affect the speed, but it is expensive to achieve. Files can be archived. Files that are archived, are often compressed before being stored. So archiving is where you move your files that you no longer use regularly to usually an external storage device, but you still have them there as a backup in case you ever need them in the future. Task management, this is where you can see how much of a disk percentage a given program is using, and you can shut down the processes if you find that it's using too much of your memory. So if you've ever used Task Manager, that's essentially what we're talking about here. It can be used to identify when a computer, if it's running slowly, which tasks are using up too much of the CPU, for example. So disk scanning and repair, this is where you can fix problems on the disk. It allows a user to detect and recover possible errors that might be occurring on their hard drive. So it can also scan the disk surfaces for defects and marks those sections so that they are unavailable and they prevent the rewriting of data to that damaged part of the disk. So if I go onto my computer here and I go to my C drive, I can right click on it and go to properties. I'm then able to go to tools and check, and then I'm not going to run it, but you will be able to see that it would scan the disk. You'll also see here that this is where you can defragment your drive to make it run more efficiently. In terms of a system backup or a system restore, this is where you automatically create restore points. Sometimes happens before you do a big update, and it means that you can roll your computer back to the state that it was in at that point. So if you come across any error or it corrupts a drive, then you can go back to the previous working version of your software. Formatting, this is the process of preparing a disk for use. So during this process, a new file system is set up on the disk, and usually all the data is erased in readiness for the new data to be stored. So often you can put a memory stick into your computer, right click on it and go to format, and it will wipe that disk and make it ready for use. The control panel. Many operating systems use a control panel to give you access to lots of different tools and features. So if I go into the control panel on my computer, you will see that it looks like this. And from here I can access all the different settings within my computer. File management. This is essentially your file explorer that you use on Windows, and this enables you to organize your files and folders, move them, copy and paste them, drag and drop them, etc. File conversion. Exactly what it says. This is where you convert one file type to another. For example, on some systems you can right click on a Word document and convert it to a PDF, or you could convert a WAV file to an MP3 if you're using sound files. So System Profiler, this is a program that can provide detailed information about the software and the hardware installed on the computer. So on my computer I have Disk Manager open, Device Manager, sorry, and you can see all the devices that are connected to my computer and the drivers and things like that. So that's part of System Profiles. Clipboard Manager, this is a temporary storage location that you use short term when you copy and paste something. So when you copy and paste something, it goes onto the clipboard and then you paste it from the clipboard into the new program that you're using. So some clipboard managers allow you to scroll back and you can see previously copied and pasted items. File transfer gives you the ability to transfer data from one location to another. It can be simply copying a file from one folder to another, or from maybe your hard drive onto an external USB stick. Data recovery. This is the process of salvaging previously inaccessible, lost or corrupted or damaged data from a secondary storage device such as your hard drive or a USB memory stick. So if your data is corrupted, data recovery tries to uncorrupt it, tries to fix that data. Version control. This is a part of a system's responsibility for managing changes to the computer programs, documents, websites or other collections of information. So what it does is it stores different versions of the file that you're working on. So on OneNote, if you right click on a page, you can go to previous versions and it will show you all the updates that you've made to that page so that you can go back and change to a previous version if you've made some mistakes. Cryptographic utilities. This is all about encrypting your data, scrambling it up so that only you or a person that you give the software key to can read it. So it enables you to make data more secure, and you can add passwords to it and things like that so that only you and trusted people can see it.